Okay. So for this class, there is a book we are going to be using, which I will share shortly with us. But for now, let me just share my screen so we'll see it. Let me know when you can see my screen.
I can see, sir.
I can also see. Okay. Does anyone have this book?
Yes, I do.
Ibokwe, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, nice one. And you're the one that said you've installed Python.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'll still share this book on the WhatsApp platform for us to use to do an introduction to Python. We are going to be going through it, using it as a guide, and it will take us through some of the key topics that we need to cover in the foundation of Python. So, for instance, we have the chapter 1 of the book, which is going to be getting started, and that's what we would look briefly into today. And then after that, we'll talk about loops, and then numbers, if statement. We'll come to strings, lists, while loops. We are going to explain all these things up to chapter 14, object-oriented programming. By the time we go through this, every one of us should have a good basics of understanding Python. And with this, we can then build on it by going into maybe data science, back-end engineering with Python, data analytics with Python, machine learning. But the key thing before you go into all these areas is to grasp the basic concepts. There are some people that learn data science, but they did not understand Python, but they use it in data science for data analytics. But in the end of the day, you find out that they struggle with the use of Python because they lack knowledge of the basics. And by the time they begin to learn the basics, they now begin to appreciate what they were taught more, because all other areas are kind of applying the Python. Now, another thing that is important is, as we learn Python, you see that most of these concepts are the same in all programming languages. Once you catch the concepts, tomorrow, if you want to apply it in another programming language, it becomes quite easier. So one of the first things you do is you're going to download Python. So if you Google download Python, I hope you can see my screen. It will take you to a link. This is the link. python.org/downloads. And here you'll be able to see that they have a latest version of Python, which is Python 3.12. And that's the one you should download. There are older versions. If you come here, you find out 3.11, 3.10, 3.9, 3.8, and so on and so forth. But just download the latest one for either Windows or for Linux or Mac operating system, whichever one you're using. When you download, let's download it, so I'll show you something. I've downloaded it. Let me open it. Okay, I already have it installed. So for me, it's telling me to modify or repair. But at this page on your computer, the first thing you see when you run the installation, there is something below. Let me just say if I want to repair if house. No. There is something below that we say add to parts. If you're on your system, can you do it so that you see what I'm talking about? How many of you can download Python now? Can we do it? This is something we can do. Okay, no problem. If you can't do it now, also later, try to make sure you do it on your system because everybody
Sir, excuse me,
needs to
sir.
have.
Which one is okay? Because the one I have before, I think is the older one I have. So I can just change it to the new one.
Actually, don't bother changing it. You can still use that one because the differences are not much between these versions and would not affect our learning. So anyone you have is okay. Don't try to change it for now. But you can update it.
Okay.
Not a problem. You can. Okay. But let's all try and download this. When we have this installed in our computer, we'll then have Python. So let me open up my CMD. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this command prompt in your computer. I am using a Windows computer. Yeah. So if I go to the Windows and type CMD, you can open your command prompt, which is this. Okay. In your command prompt, you can check the version of Python you have by typing Python -v. Okay, so I went straight into the Python shell. There are a lot of things here, but I can see my version. But I'll exit for now so that I make it a little bit simplified. Hold on. Okay, so if you type Python, just Python, after installation, you should be able to see something like this. That will basically just tell you the version and some other details with these 3 arrows. When you just type Python on your command prompt, if you don't see this, it means that 1, you don't have Python installed, or Python is not added to the patch. This is the reasons why I wanted us to do it together so that in case you have any challenge, we can then walk through it. But then, if you're not able to see this after running the installation, you download it and install. If you don't see this, what it then means is that your Python is not added to the path, or in some systems, even if you click add to path, sometimes it does not add it on the system variable, but just it will add it on a user variable. I'll show you that in a second. So again, if your command prompt is open before you install your Python, you just need to close it, open it up again, and then check if it's properly installed. So if it's properly installed, you're going to have something like this with these 3 arrows, which is called a Python shell. You've entered into the Python shell. We will come back to Python shell later. We can use it for debugging purposes and for checking certain things quickly. But for now, to come out of the shell, you type exit with 2, with open and close parentheses, and then enter. We'll return back to CMD. So in your command prompt, you can move through different folders, going forward, coming backwards, depending on where you want to go in your computer. Before I proceed, I hope we understand. Is there anybody that does not know what command prompt is, so that we know if we throw more light into it or we go ahead at this point? Okay, nobody is saying anything, so I don't know. Maybe let me just throw more light.
Yes, sorry. I don't know if you can.
Sure.
I'm just joining. I don't know if you can just a quick one on how I can store. If
on how
also
you can
this meeting
install.
is being recorded. If this meeting is being recorded, because I'm using my phone for it, so maybe after the meeting I can also follow the recording to install.
Okay. Yeah. For you to install Python, you can just go to Google and search Python downloads. I search it, so you will see Python download. You will see this link from python.org. Download Python. Click on it. It should bring you here. This is the page where you download Python. Okay, from python.org. When you're downloading, just ensure you're downloading from python.org, so that you don't go and click a link that will take you to something else. So you just see download, usually on the latest version, just download it. When you download it, a file will be downloaded, a file like this, into your download folder. Open it and run it. When you're running it, on the first part that comes out, ensure you click add Python to patch and then install. After installation, you come to your Windows and type CMD or command prompt. Then you open up this prompt we are looking at. So we said if you want to check if it's installed, you can also type Python here. Python and enter. This will take us into the Python shell. If you don't see this, it will give you a warning like it did not recognize Python. Python is not a recognized command. It will tell you something like that. Now, if that happens, don't need to panic if you have installed it. It simply means Python was not added to path. Or some computers, even though you click add to path, it may not add it to the system variable path, but user variable. And then if that happens, what you need to do to resolve it, for those of us using Windows, because this is usually on Windows, this happens on Windows. You go back to your Windows, you touch your Windows button, and then you type system variables or environment variables. You can type environment variables. So you would see this come out, edit environment variables. Okay. That is for those of you that wouldn't see this shell when you type Python. After installation, you just come here and then go to environment variables. Environment variables, and then you click on it. When you open your environment variables, this dialog box will come out. Below, you'll find another button, environment variables. You click here. It will take you to the environment variable for your computer. Now you see there are two. We have the user variables, and then we have the system variables. Python needs to be installed in path. This one here called path. In the system variable. So if I scroll down, where is path? Okay, there it is. Here. Okay. Sometimes when you click add to path during installation, it only installs it here. And it might even work on your command prompt. But by the time you go to Visual Studio Code, it will not work because it's not installed in your system variable. So let me go to my path and you see what is there. In path now, you can find this first line highlighted in blue that ends in /Python 312/script. You find another one that ends in Python 312. And then you see a third one. These three were added to the path during installation. Now, if you find out that it's working on your command prompt, but when you go to the terminal, I believe you're familiar with the terminal in Visual Studio Code, you see that it's not working. What you do, you come to these environment variables and copy the ones that are in your path here, one by one. You can just double click and Control C, copy. Don't edit, just copy. And you cancel. When you come to the path in system variable, double click, and then you say new, and you paste it here. In my own, I've already put it in system variable, so you can see them here. 1, 2, 3. So just ensure that you have them in the path this way, and then you OK, and you're good to go. It might not be as straightforward, or if you have any challenge doing this, you can always just message and we'll see how we can ensure your Python is up and running. Okay. So when you start doing it, we'll know how far, because you need to do it to ensure that it's on your system. So at this point, I will come out of the shell, and the command is exit. Open and close parentheses. So I go back. CLS is a command to just clear. So this is my prompt. I've cleared everything. Now, okay, I will not talk much about the prompt because when we enter Visual Studio Code, there's something I wanted to explain here on how to enter into folders and comma. But in Visual Studio Code, we would look at that. It's similar to this. So if I open my VS Code, which is this, you will see the terminal below, which in your other lesson you'll be using to work. In your terminal, you see this first line. It's almost similar to the line here. Similar commands too you can execute to work around. So that's it for installation of Python. I don't know if anyone has any questions so far. Okay, so we'll go ahead since there is no question. So after your Python is installed, you can, I believe we know how to use Visual Studio Code and open a folder, right? If there's anyone who has not been attending the other class and doesn't notice, you can let us know now so we go into that. Otherwise, we keep going forward because the other class we've been doing, let me see, there's a message here. Okay, yes. The other class we've been having, see that we've been creating files. Your HTML is pretty much the same. This is still Visual Studio Code. And then you're in your learning environment. Now, to create a Python file is similar to HTML, but you just ensure that your file is saved as .py. So if I add a file and call it Python _start.py. So that .py is what makes it a Python file. For those of you that are in HTML, you find out that you save it as .html file. This is called the extension. So the extension for Python file is .py. Okay. So anything you want to name your file, but just end with .py and then you press enter. So this .py makes it a Python file. If you don't save it with .py, it's not a Python file. And then now we'll type our first Python command, which should just be a simple command to print. And we're going to be printing hello world. Okay. So in Python, to print out, you just use the command or the function called print. And you open your parentheses, close it, and then type whatever you want to print in quotation, which is a string. So this is going to print out Python to the console. I'll save the file and I'm going to run it. There is a button here, if you see my mouse, like a play button. It can run your Python for you, but we are advised not to use it. Don't use this button. It may seem as an easy way to write and run your Python, but when you do that, you would lose touch of how to run it from the command, from the terminal, from the command line. So when you have saved your Python file, to run Python files, you come back to your terminal, and then you will type Python. Okay, our Zoom meeting may end in 10. It will end in 10 minutes, and then we'll log back in. So you type Python, and then the file name. .py. See, I named mine Python start. So Python space Python start.py, and I press enter. So you see, it's printed what I put here, which is hello world. So this is just to show you how to create a Python file, save it, and execute it. Okay. So once you're able to do this, you can then be sure that you can run a Python file, create one, and run it. So you have your hello world. Now this same print command, is not as simple as this. It's a little bit deeper, but we'll explain it. At this point now, we've installed Python. You have your Visual Studio Code environment. You know how to create a Python file, and you know how to run it properly. I have to also let us know there are different versions of Python. Yeah. Let me put it right there. So we have Python 2, and we have Python 3. I just say, let me explain this to you. If you see where we downloaded Python, everything is 3 points, 3 point, 3 point. So that's Python 3. Okay. In some text, you may see that to run Python, instead of typing Python, they may say type it like this, Python 3, and then Python. Let me see if it will work on my system that way. .py. See, mine is not working that way, but in some text, you will see it like that. Okay, because the Python we are using is Python 3. The older version of Python is Python 2. There are some people still use it because their codes are old codes that were written in Python 2. But most people that wrote their codes in Python 2 today have converted it or are converting it to Python 3. Okay. Just in case you see it somewhere, don't get confused. It's just 2 versions of Python. Now, another thing you have to know about Python, it is case sensitive. When we say case sensitive, you have to maintain the case of the variable or Python function. For instance, this same print function, if you type it print with capital letter, it will not work in Python because Python print is small letter p. So when you're working with Python, you need to be careful about the whether it's capital letter or small letter. It matters a lot in Python. Okay. Now, in Python, when you want to create a comment, for instance, if I want this code, which we wrote earlier, to become a comment, I will just put hash in front. Okay. Once you put hash in front of any line, it becomes a comment. Python is not going to run it when you're executing the file because that is a comment. But when you remove the hash, it becomes an executable file. Okay, so you might be working on that book, which we are going to share, and there are exercises. You may want to be maybe naming them number 1, number 2. Those are not part of the code. But as you're naming them, you just ensure that you use the hash so that it's a non-executable. Okay. So there are other things about Python as we continue. We are still going to understand because Python works with indentation. The way your codes are structured in Python and the way it deals with scope is based on indentation. So as we go on, you understand that, but we'll not dive deep into that now so that you don't get confused about it. Okay. So this is just the basics. Then now, what is expected of us in this class is to try and put in a little effort to practice some exercises of Python so that it's going to be part of you. You might be listening now and say, oh yes, I understand, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll save the file, I'll type my command, I'll go to the command line and type the Python file name .py and I'll run it. I know how to run Python files. But if you don't try it out yourself, you'll find out that in the next 2-3 days, you really don't know what to do. If someone tells you, can you run a Python file? It will be difficult. So that's why we are going to be using this book. Now, if you see what we've gone through, we've talked about installing Python. So you don't need to dwell on this. We talk about IDLE. IDLE is your integrated development environment, which is Visual Studio we are using for this course. And then we'll talk like your first program, Hello World. We have already gotten to 4. So there are still some other things which we want you to go through. Okay. We'll still talk about them in class because this class is just basically an introduction to Python, just to get you set up to know how we are going to be running the class. But if you have time, when I send you the book, you can start reading it. Okay, let me go straight into this. For instance, this is it now. This is where we downloaded Python from, installing Python. Then talk about the IDE. And then we had our first program, Hello World. Although here they have another thing. You can also follow them when you study the book. But don't bother about this IDE they mentioned in the book. And installing Python here, they use version 2.7, right? Okay, 3.5 as of when the book was written. But today we are talking about 3.12. Someone has anything. Yes, I will send the book via WhatsApp after this class. Now, what we expect from you in this, where we're giving you this book, is we expect you to, within this week, our class is going to end soon, and we'll just log back in, okay? We have less than 1 minute, so when it cuts, just use the link again.